My family framed my brother's uniform in the center of the hero wall. They framed my grandfather's medals. They framed my father's old service flag. They even framed a picture of our dead hunting dog wearing a camouflage bandana. But my army photo was gone. At my brother's hero dinner, there was no chair for me. No name card. No plate. No place at the family table. Then Derek handed me an orange valet vest and said, "Every hero dinner needs someone to park the trucks." When I refused, he poured a bottle of beer down my dress shirt in front of the whole VFW hall, and my mother looked at me, not him, and whispered, "Don't embarrass the family." That was the moment I understood. They had not forgotten me. They had edited me out. The beer was warm. That was the first thing I remember. It soaked through my white shirt spread across my chest in an ugly brown stain and dripped from the hem onto my polished shoes. For 1 second, my body froze before my mind could catch up. Then the room came back. The VFW hall, the folded flags, the string lights, the smell of brisket, beer cologne, and old wood. The banner over the stage read, "Mercer Family Heroes Dinner." Beneath it was the wall my family had spent weeks building for the event. My grandfather, Walter Mercer, in Korea, standing beside a truck with snow on the hood. My father, Raymond Mercer, in desert fatigues, young and hard-eyed, long before he became the quiet man everyone mistook for a regular truck driver. My older brother, Derek, in dress blues, chin lifted, looking like a recruitment poster. My cousin Troy in his sheriff's deputy uniform. Uncle Wade cutting the ribbon at Mercer Outdoor Supply. And Buck, our old hound dog. Buck had been dead for 6 years, but there he was, framed and smiling under a camouflage bandana like he had stormed a beach somewhere. But there was no picture of me. Not in uniform. Not at basic training. Not at my EMT ceremony. Not even as a kid standing beside Grandpa at the feed store. It was like the Mercer family had decided I had never happened. Derek lowered the empty beer bottle and smiled. "Oops," he said. "Reflex. Thought you were one of the waiters." A few people laughed. Not everyone, but enough. That kind of laugh is worse than the whole room laughing. It lets the decent people stay quiet and gives the cruel people permission to continue. My cousin Troy lifted his phone higher. "Say something, Evan," he said. "Give us one of those haunted looks." More laughter. I looked down at my shirt. That shirt was not expensive. It was from a department store clearance rack, but I had worn it to my EMT certification ceremony. It still had a tiny burn mark near the cuff from the night a generator blew at the county fair, and I pulled a little boy away from the sparks. It was mine, and Derek had ruined it, because he knew the room would let him. My mother, Marla Mercer, crossed the room quickly. For 1 stupid second, I thought she was coming to help. She wasn't. "Evan," she whispered, gripping my elbow, "go clean up before the county commissioner sees you." I stared at her. Derek poured beer on me. Her mouth tightened. He was joking. He called me a waiter. Her eyes flicked toward the front tables where the donors, business owners, and local officials were watching with polite discomfort. "Tonight is important." That was always the answer. When Derek took credit for work I did at the family store tonight was important. When he missed Dad's VA appointment, and I drove 6 hours to bring Dad home, Derek was busy with important people. When my old army photo disappeared from the family hallway, and Derek's got moved to the center, Mom said we had to think about which stories helped the Mercer name. Tonight was important. The Mercer name was important. Derek was important. I was something to manage. Derek leaned against the dessert table, arms crossed. "Mom let him be dramatic," he said. "It's what he does now." I looked at him. "I came because you invited me." "No," Derek said. "Mom invited you because it looks bad if the younger Mercer boy isn't here." A few heads turned. My ears burned. Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that the people nearby could still hear. "Let's not pretend, Evan. You didn't come home a hero. You came home broken." The room went still. That word, broken. He knew exactly where to put it. My mother inhaled sharply, but she did not correct him. Uncle Wade looked down at his plate. Troy kept recording. I looked past them at the hero wall. My grandfather's medals glowed under the warm lights. The family had used those medals for everything: advertisements, speeches, Memorial Day posts, Veterans Day coupons at the hardware store. Walter Mercer built Mercer Outdoor Supply after coming home from Korea with frostbite scars and a knee that never healed right. He sold boots, tarps, work gloves, feed generators, and anything else a rural county needed when weather turned mean. Grandpa used to say, "A man's legacy ain't what hangs on a wall. It's who eats because he showed up." After he died, my family turned his life into branding. Mercer courage, Mercer service, Mercer blood, and somehow the only Mercer grandson who had actually carried wounded men under fire had become too inconvenient to frame. I looked at Mom. "Where's my picture?" Her face changed, just a little, but I saw it. Derek saw it too. His smile thinned. "Here we go." I pointed at the wall. "You put Buck up there." Mom sighed. "Evan, my dead dog is on the hero wall. I'm not." Derek laughed. Buck had better discipline. Somebody at the back coughed to hide a laugh. My chest tightened. "Where is my picture?" Mom lowered her voice. "Your service was complicated." Complicated. That was what she called it when she did not want to say wounded, or quiet, or inconvenient, or not useful for the family business. Derek stepped beside her. "Mine wasn't complicated," he said. "I showed up. I stayed clean. I didn't come home and hide in an ambulance bay." I felt something cold move through me. "You were stateside for most of your contract." His eyes flashed. The room sharpened around us. Derek's service was real. I would never say otherwise. He wore the uniform. He trained. He served on bases in Texas and Germany. There was honor in that. But Derek had spent years letting people assume his polished stories came from combat. He never corrected them. Not when donors asked. Not when the local paper called him the Mercer son, who saw the worst and came back stronger. Not when Mom cried during speeches about how proud she was that her oldest boy carried the family's warrior blood. I never said anything. Not because I was afraid of Derek, because I thought family should not expose family in public. Derek leaned close. "Careful, little brother." I met his eyes. "No, you be careful." For the first time that night, his smile disappeared. Mom gripped my arm harder. "Evan, stop." "Why?" I asked. "Because I'm embarrassing him. He just dumped beer on me." "You're making a scene." A scene. The word people use when the wounded person finally stops bleeding quietly. Derek picked up the orange valet vest and shoved it against my chest. "Go outside," he said. "Cars are still coming." I let the vest fall to the floor. "Number." The room seemed to lean toward us. Mom's face hardened with panic. "Evan," she whispered. "Derek knows how to carry the Mercer name. You only know how to make people worry." That sentence hit harder than the beer, because Derek's cruelty was expected. My mother's disappointment was not. I looked at the folder tucked under Derek's arm, the one Aunt Cynthia had been carrying earlier. It had the county seal on the front and a glossy mock-up inside. Patriot Ridge. That was Derek's dream. A veterans retreat on the old Mercer property cabins. Event barn therapy, trails a shooting range, corporate retreats, and a restaurant called the Mess Hall. Derek said it would honor Grandpa. Dad said Grandpa would haunt every nail in the place. They needed the old training field and the small cabin by Mill Creek to make the project work. That cabin had been left to both Mercer sons. Derek needed my signature. Suddenly the dinner made sense. The invitation, the missing chair, the beer, the valet vest, the public humiliation. They wanted me small before they asked me to give away the last piece of the family I still had. Derek saw me looking at the folder. His jaw flexed. "Outside," he said. Troy moved behind me. He was a sheriff's deputy now, but he still moved like the cousin who used to lock me in the feed shed and tell everyone I was scared of the dark. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Not hard, just enough." I looked around the room one more time. At my mother, at Uncle Wade, at Aunt Cynthia, at the old men from the VFW who knew better, at the cousins who had eaten food I paid for when their fathers lost jobs, at the people who had clapped for speeches built on my silence. No one moved. So I moved, not because Troy pushed me, because if I stayed in that room one more second, I might say something I could never take back. The side door opened into the gravel lot behind the VFW hall. Cold November air hit my wet shirt and made me shiver. The sound of music and applause faded when the door closed behind us. Derek came out first. Troy followed. Then Aunt Cynthia stepped outside, holding the folder like a church bulletin. She had always been the polite kind of cruel. Soft voice, pearl earrings, Bible verses on Facebook, knives wrapped in napkins. Evan, she said, this could have been handled inside with dignity. I laughed once. It sounded ugly. Dignity. He poured beer on me. Derek rolled his eyes. It was one beer. It was in front of everyone. And you lived. Aunt Cynthia opened the folder. Your brother has worked very hard on Patriot Ridge. The county is interested. Donors are interested. Veterans groups are interested. This is bigger than your feelings. There it was again. My feelings. As if humiliation was not real until money touched it. She pulled out a pen. All we need is your release on the Mill Creek cabin and the back acreage. I stared at the papers. Number. Derek laughed. You haven't even read it. I don't need to. Aunt Cynthia's smile tightened. You will be compensated. I said no. Derek stepped closer. You live above an ambulance garage, Evan. Your truck barely starts. You eat gas station burritos for dinner. Don't stand here acting like you're too proud for a check. The words hit because they were almost true. I did live in the apartment above Station 4. My truck did barely start. And some nights I did eat whatever was still warm under the gas station heat lamp after a 12-hour shift. But poverty is not consent. Exhaustion is not permission. Being tired does not mean people get to buy the last sacred thing you have. The cabin was Grandpa's, I said. And Grandpa wanted this family to grow, Derek snapped. No, I said. Grandpa wanted this family to feed people. Derek's face darkened. Don't you dare use him against me. You use him every day. For a second, nobody breathed. Then Troy shoved me. Not hard enough to knock me down, but enough that my back hit the brick wall. Watch your mouth, he said. I looked at his hand on my chest. Then at his badge. You wearing that tonight as family or law enforcement? Troy pulled his hand back like I had burned him. Derek leaned in close. Listen to me. You are going to sign, because if you don't, we tell the county exactly what you are. I looked at him. What am I? His smile returned. Unstable. The word landed like a fist. Aunt Cynthia said softly, No one wants to hurt you, Evan. But your episodes are known. The shaking, the quiet, the nightmares. It would break your mother's heart if people started asking whether the Mercer family should trust you with land tied to a veterans project. I stared at her. She had rehearsed that. Maybe they all had. Derek continued. We don't even have to lie. We just tell them you're not well. We tell them you're jealous of your brother. We tell them you couldn't handle service, so now you punish everyone who can. Behind him, the side door opened. Mom stepped out. For a moment, hope rose in me before I could stop it. She had heard enough. She had come to stop this. She looked at me, then at Derek, then at the folder. Evan, she said quietly, just sign it. The hope died so fast it left me dizzy. I stared at my mother. You too. Her eyes shone, but her voice stayed firm. Your brother knows how to carry the Mercer name. And I don't. She looked down. That was the answer. Derek looked satisfied. Aunt Cynthia held out the pen. I did not take it. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, from the effort it took to stay standing in front of people who kept confusing my restraint with weakness. No, I said. Derek's face hardened. Then go. What? He pointed toward the road. Go, you're done here, Mom whispered Derek. He ignored her. This dinner is for people who understand service, not people who hide behind trauma and expect applause. I looked at Mom. She was crying now, but still silent. That hurt worse than Derek's words, because Derek had always been cruel. Mom had chosen not to protect me. Aunt Cynthia tucked the papers back into the folder. Troy opened the gate at the edge of the gravel lot. Derek picked up my coat from a chair by the door and threw it into the mud near my boots. Walk it off, soldier, he said. Then they went back inside. The door shut. The music rose again, and I stood in the cold behind the VFW hall, wet, shaking, and erased. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Troy's wife, Melanie. A photo. She had already posted it. A picture of me outside, shirt, stained eyes, hard, standing in the gravel, like I was about to start a fight. The caption read, "Sad when jealousy shows up at a night meant to honor real heroes. Pray for the Mercer family." The comments came fast. "Is that Evan?" He always seemed off after he came back. Poor Derek. He worked so hard. Some people can't handle seeing their brother succeed. PTSD is real, but it's not an excuse to ruin family events. I turned the phone off. Then I started walking. The VFW hall was on the edge of town. Station 4 was almost 4 miles away. The cold bit through my wet shirt. My shoes crunched over gravel, then pavement. Cars passed. Some slowed. No one stopped. Small towns are funny that way. They will bring you casserole after a funeral, but they will drive past you in the dark if stopping means choosing a side. By the time I reached the ambulance station, my hands were numb. The bay doors were closed. The upstairs apartment window glowed yellow. I climbed the metal stairs and unlocked my door. The apartment smelled like coffee laundry detergent and the peppermint oil I used when I couldn't sleep. I stood in the middle of the room and stared at nothing. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was not Derek. It was Dad. "You at the dinner." I stared at the message. My father, Raymond Mercer, had not been invited. Mom said it was because Dad and Derek always fought. Derek said it was because Dad liked to big-time people with old army stories. Aunt Cynthia said he made donors uncomfortable, but the truth was simpler. Dad saw through them. I texted back. I left. 3 dots appeared. Then, "Did they touch the cabin?" My throat tightened. Not, "Are you okay?" Not because he didn't care. Because Dad knew our family. He knew the order of damage. First they humiliated you. Then they asked for something. I sat on the edge of my bed and typed. They tried. I didn't sign. The phone rang immediately. I answered. For a second, all I heard was engine noise. Then Dad's voice came through low and steady. "Where are you?" "Station." "Are you hurt?" I looked down at my shirt. "Number." A pause. "Evan." My jaw tightened. "Not badly." Another pause. "This one colder." "Who put hands on you?" "Dad." "Who?" I closed my eyes. Troy shoved me. Derek threw my coat in the mud. "It's nothing." Dad exhaled slowly. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was not the voice of the man who sent bad jokes at 5 a.m. or told me which gas station had the best biscuits. It was the voice I remembered from childhood, when storms took out county roads and grown men looked at him for orders. "What else?" "They took my picture down," I said. Silence. "From the wall. They never put it up." I laughed, but it came out broken. "They put Buck up there. The dog made the wall, Dad." The engine noise on his end seemed to fade. Then Dad asked one question. "What did your mother do?" I stared at the floor. "She told me to sign." For a long time, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "Lock your door." "Dad." "Lock it." I stood and turned the deadbolt. "Done. Pack a bag." "Why?" "Because you're not walking into tomorrow as their ghost." I swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means you bring your uniform." "My uniform?" "Yes. I don't wear it anymore." "You don't have to wear it for them," Dad said. "You wear it for yourself." I looked toward the closet. At the garment bag I had not opened in almost 3 years. "I don't know if I can." Dad's voice softened. "Then don't decide yet. Just pack it." I heard him speak to someone away from the phone. "Tell Pike we're changing route. Call Harland. Wake Ramirez if he's willing. And get me every vendor tied to Patriot Ridge." My heart started pounding. "Dad, where are you?" 27 miles out. I froze. "What?" "I was coming anyway." "Why?" "Because your grandfather's birthday is tomorrow," he said. "And because I had a bad feeling." The line crackled. Then his voice lowered. "They think I'm just a truck driver. They always did." "You are a truck driver." Dad gave a dry laugh. "I drove trucks, son." I also commanded the men who kept 3 provinces alive with fuel water medicine and food when every road was trying to kill us. I sat slowly. Most people in town knew Dad had served. Most knew he had retired as a colonel. But the Mercers had spent years shrinking him. Supply guy, truck man, clipboard soldier. Useful, but not heroic. Dad had let them because Dad did not need applause. But I could hear something in his voice now. The patience had run out. Dad, I said, don't make this bigger. They made it bigger when they touched the cabin. It's just land. No, he said. It's your grandfather's table. My throat closed. He continued. And they made it bigger when they used your wound as a weapon. I rubbed my face. They'll say I'm unstable. Let them. They'll say I'm jealous. Let them. They'll say Derek is the real hero. This time Dad did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was like steel under cloth. Then tomorrow we correct the record. The call ended. I stood alone in my small apartment, beer drying on my shirt mud on my coat, the whole town already choosing a story about me. For years I had thought silence was discipline, that if I stayed quiet I was being honorable, that if I did not correct people, I was being humble, that if I let Derek stand in the light, maybe Mom would stop looking at me like I was a reminder of something painful. But silence is not always honor. Sometimes silence is just the room where other people build lies. I walked to the closet. At the bottom was the garment bag. My dress uniform hung inside, pressed, covered, waiting. My hands shook when I touched it. Not because I was ashamed, because I remembered. A road outside Kandahar. A convoy stopped by smoke and fire. A young private screaming for his mother. My hands inside a man's chest wound holding pressure, while rounds cracked overhead. Derek's voice pulled me back. Broken. I stared at the uniform. For years, I had treated it like a locked room. Dad had told me to pack it, but he did not tell me to open it. That choice was mine. I unzipped the bag. If Derek wanted to wear my story, then I was going to wear the truth. Dad arrived at 1:13 in the morning. I knew because the microwave clock blinked as headlights swept across the apartment wall. I went to the window. A black pickup pulled into the ambulance station lot. Behind it came 2 more trucks, then a box truck, then a van with out-of-state plates. They parked in a neat line, not flashy, not loud, but with the kind of precision that makes ordinary vehicles look like a formation. Dad stepped out of the lead truck. He wore jeans boots and an old field jacket. His hair was grayer than the last time I saw him. His shoulders were still square. He looked up at my window. For 1 second, I was 8 years old again, standing on the porch, while he came home from a deployment, trying not to run because I wanted to look tough. Then I ran anyway. I was down the stairs and across the lot before he reached the bottom step. He caught me in both arms. I was taller than him now, barely. But in that moment, I felt like a boy. He held me tight. Not hard, steady. I'm here, he said. That was all. I pressed my face against his shoulder and breathed in diesel-cold air and old canvas. Behind him, men and women stepped out of the other vehicles. Some wore work jackets. Some wore veteran caps. One had a cane. One had a sleeve pinned at the elbow. One was a woman with silver hair and a Marine Corps sweatshirt, carrying a laptop bag like it weighed nothing. They did not look like an army. They looked like the people who show up after the storm when the pretty speeches are over. Dad pulled back and looked at my shirt. His jaw tightened. Derek, I nodded. He looked at my wrist, then my coat, then my face. Did you hit him? Number. Good. He turned slightly. Because tomorrow he's going to wish you had. A tall man with a gray beard stepped forward. He wore a black coat and moved like his knees hurt. But his pride did not. Medic Mercer, he said. I froze. Nobody had called me that in years. Sergeant Pike, I said. He smiled. Retired now. But I still answer if the right colonel calls. Another man stepped up. He was younger, maybe early 30s, with burn scars running up the left side of his neck. I knew him immediately. Corporal Luis Ramirez, the private who had screamed for his mother. He was a father now. I knew from Christmas cards he sent to Dad, but never to me because I never answered. Ramirez looked at me for a long second. Then he stepped forward and hugged me. You saved my life, he whispered. I shut my eyes. I did my job. He pulled back. No, he said. You saved my life. Dad let the words sit in the cold air. Then he looked toward the trucks. Inside, We have work. My apartment had never held that many people. They filled the tiny kitchen, the doorway, the wall near my couch. Dad put a folder on my table. I looked at it and almost laughed. Please tell me this isn't a legal thing. He shook his head. No lawyers, no lawsuits, not tonight. He opened the folder. Inside were printed copies of social media posts, old brochures, donor flyers, a photo of my grandfather's cabin, and a glossy mock-up of Patriot Ridge. At the center was a line from the fundraising materials, inspired by the Mercer son, who pulled wounded soldiers from a burning convoy and came home committed to helping veterans heal. I stared at the sentence. My stomach turned. They used it, I said. Dad nodded. They used your story. Derek's face was all over the brochure. Derek shaking hands with veterans. Derek standing beside an American flag. Derek's quote, "Service taught me that no man gets left behind. Patriot Ridge will carry that promise forward." I had to stand up. For a second, the room tilted. Ramirez cursed under his breath. Pike's face went hard. Dad watched me carefully. "They said it was Derek," I whispered. "They let people think it was Derek," Dad said. "That's different enough for cowards and close enough for fundraising." The woman with silver hair opened her laptop. "My name is Captain Ellen Harland," she said. "Retired. I handled casualty documentation for that deployment." I nodded, though I barely heard her. She continued. "Your father asked me to verify only what can be shared publicly. Nothing classified. Nothing that harms anyone. Just the truth." I looked at Dad. He held my gaze. "This does not happen unless you say it happens." The room went quiet. That mattered. After a night of being dragged, shoved, filmed, and spoken over, someone had finally asked for my permission. I looked at the brochure again. Derek's smile. My story. Grandpa's cabin. Mom's silence. My beer-soaked shirt. Something settled inside me. Not anger. Anger burns too fast. This was heavier. Cleaner. "I want them to stop telling my story," I said. Dad nodded once. Then we stopped them. The next morning was Veterans Day. The town woke up under a gray sky cold enough to make every flag snap hard in the wind. My phone was full again. More comments. More posts. Troy's video had spread fast. By breakfast, half the town had watched me standing outside the VFW hall with beer on my shirt. The story was already written. Evan Mercer had snapped. Evan was jealous. Evan could not handle Derek's success. Evan had always been a little off after the war. Derek posted at 8:04 a.m. a black and white picture of himself looking serious beside an American flag. Caption, "Last night was difficult. I love my brother, and I pray he finds peace. Today I choose service over drama. See you all at the Patriot Ridge launch." I stared at it. Then I set the phone down. Dad sat across from me at the station kitchen table. He slid a cup of black coffee toward me. "Don't drink poison just because somebody served it in a patriotic mug," he said. I laughed despite myself. That sounds like Grandpa. It was Grandpa. By 10, I had showered, shaved, and put on my dress uniform. The jacket felt heavier than I remembered. Not physically. Every ribbon, every crease, every polished button had a memory attached to it. Dad knocked on the open door. He wore his own dress uniform. I had not seen him in it since a military funeral when I was 16. Colonel Raymond Mercer looked nothing like the man my family mocked at Thanksgiving. He looked like a chapter of American history had walked into my apartment and buttoned its coat. He adjusted his cuff. "You ready? Number." "Good," he said. Honest answer. I looked in the mirror. For years I had avoided this uniform because people stared at it and wanted stories. Clean stories. Hero stories. Stories they could clap for between dessert and coffee. They did not want the truth. The truth smelled like smoke, blood, diesel, and burnt rubber. The truth woke you up at 3 a.m. The truth made fireworks sound like incoming rounds. But standing there, I realized the uniform was not the problem. The lies were. Dad stepped beside me in the mirror. "You don't have to prove anything to them." "Then why are we going?" "Because they built a stage out of your silence." He put his cover under his arm. "Today you take the stage back." The Patriot Ridge launch was held on the old Mercer property in the field beside the Mill Creek cabin. They had dressed it up fast. White tent, portable stage, hay bales wrapped in red, white, and blue bunting. A giant sign showed a digital rendering of cabins, walking trails, a memorial wall, and a restaurant called the Mess Hall. Grandpa would have hated the font. People filled the field, local officials, donors, veterans, church ladies, business owners, reporters from the county paper, and half the people who had commented on Troy's post. At the front of the stage stood Derek. Perfect haircut, perfect navy suit, American flag pin. Beside him, Mom wore a cream coat and pearls. She looked nervous. Good. Aunt Cynthia held a clipboard. Troy stood near the parking area in uniform, hands on his belt, scanning the crowd like he expected me to show up throwing punches. He saw Dad's truck first, then the vehicles behind it. One by one, they turned into the field. Dad's black pickup, the 2 work trucks, the box truck, the van. Then 3 more vehicles I had not seen arrive overnight. A county emergency response truck, an old Army green cargo vehicle restored for parades, and a white refrigerated truck with a relief organization logo on the side. They did not roar in. They did not speed. They rolled in slow, steady, deliberate. Every conversation in the field thinned. Troy walked toward us frowning. Dad parked, cut the engine, and stepped out. I stepped out beside him. In uniform, the field went quiet. I felt hundreds of eyes hit me at once. Derek saw the uniform and his face changed. Not fear, not yet. Irritation, like I had worn something tacky to his wedding. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Aunt Cynthia whispered something to Derek. Dad came around the truck and stood beside me. Behind us, the others stepped out. Pike, Ramirez, Captain Harland, veterans from my old unit, drivers who had served under Dad, men and women whose names never appeared on glossy brochures because they were too busy doing the work. Derek walked toward us with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Dad, he said loudly for the crowd. Evan, I'm glad you came. I hope today can be about healing. Dad looked at him. Is that what you call it? Derek lowered his voice. Don't do this here. I almost laughed. Last night he needed an audience. Today he wanted privacy. Dad glanced at the stage. You're standing on family land, using family service, selling family history, and asking my son to disappear. His voice stayed calm. This is exactly where we do it. Troy stepped forward. Colonel Mercer, we don't want trouble. Dad turned his eyes to him. Troy stopped walking, not because Dad threatened him, because some men do not need to. Deputy Dad said, take your hand off your belt before you embarrass the badge worse than you already have. Troy's face reddened. Slowly he moved his hand. Aunt Cynthia hurried over, smiling too widely. Ray, please. We're about to begin. This is a celebration. Dad looked toward the Patriot Ridge sign. No, he said. It's a correction. Derek's jaw tightened. Correction of what? Dad looked at me. This was the moment. I could still walk away. I could still be the quiet one, the easy one, the damaged one. I looked at the cabin beyond the stage, peeling white paint, loose porch rail, Grandpa's old wind chime hanging near the door. I remembered him sitting there with coffee, teaching me how to sharpen a pocket knife, and telling me a man's name was not something other people got to rent. I took a breath. Then I walked toward the stage. The crowd parted, not respectfully at first, more like curiosity, like they wanted a better view of whatever breakdown they had been promised online. Derek moved quickly to intercept me. Evan, he hissed, don't ruin this. I stopped. You used my story. His face hardened. Our story. No, I said, mine. He smiled tightly. You were useful overseas. Here you're just bad for the brand. The words were meant to cut. They did, but they also freed me, because he had finally said the quiet part out loud. I looked at him. Then stop selling the brand with my blood on it. Something flickered in his eyes. Maybe fear. Maybe the first understanding that I was not there to yell. I was there to speak. Dad stepped onto the stage first. The microphone was still on the stand. He adjusted it. The speakers popped. The crowd quieted. Good morning, Dad said. His voice carried over the field like it had been trained to cross distance. My name is Colonel Raymond Mercer, United States Army retired. A murmur moved through the crowd. Of course they knew Dad had served. But hearing him say it like that in uniform with ribbons catching gray daylight changed the air. Dad continued, I was asked not to attend today. Mom looked down. Derek's smile froze. I was told this launch was about honoring Mercer service. Since I am a Mercer, and since I served, I found that interesting. A few people shifted. Dad looked toward the cabin. My father, Walter Mercer, believed service was not a photograph. It was not a slogan. It was not a business plan. Service was showing up when there was nothing to gain. He turned back to the crowd. Today, I watched my family use the word service to sell a project while erasing the man whose service gave them the story. Derek stepped toward the microphone. Dad, that's enough. Dad did not look at him. Not even close. Captain Harlan connected her laptop to the projector set up for Derek's presentation. The screen behind Dad flickered. The glossy Patriot Ridge rendering disappeared. In its place appeared the fundraising brochure. Derek's face. The quote. The line about the Mercer son who pulled wounded soldiers from a burning convoy. Dad let the crowd read it. Then he spoke. This story is true. Derek's shoulders relaxed slightly. Dad continued. It is not Derek's. The field went silent. Mom closed her eyes. Dad looked at me. Sergeant Evan Mercer. Front and center. My legs almost failed me. No one had called me sergeant in my hometown. Not once. I stepped forward. The grass felt soft under my polished shoes. Dad turned to face me. For one brief second, he was not my father. He was the colonel. His hand rose in a salute. Sharp, formal, full. Behind him, Pike saluted. Then Captain Harlan. Then Ramirez, his scarred hand shaking slightly. Then the other veterans, one by one. Men with canes, women with silver hair, old soldiers in faded jackets. They saluted me in front of the entire town. At first, nobody clapped. Nobody dared. They had been laughing at me 12 hours earlier. Now they were watching men with missing limbs and silver hair salute the same man they had called unstable. My throat closed. The field blurred. I forced myself not to cry. Not because crying would be weak. Because if I started, I would not stop. Dad dropped his salute. So did they. Then Ramirez stepped up to the microphone. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear. Ramirez adjusted the mic. My name is Luis Ramirez, he said. I was 19 years old when our convoy got hit outside Kandahar. I was trapped in the second vehicle. I was bleeding out. I remember fire. I remember screaming. And I remember Sergeant Evan Mercer crawling into that vehicle when everyone else thought it was going to blow. His voice cracked. He kept going. He held my artery closed with his hand for 18 minutes. He talked to me about my mother, my little sister, and a dog he said was too dumb to die. A small laugh moved through the crowd. Buck! Ramirez smiled through wet eyes. That dog was Buck. I know because Sergeant Mercer would not shut up about him while keeping me alive. I laughed once painfully. Ramirez looked at Derek. I don't know what your family told you. I don't know what story got printed on your flyers, but I know who pulled me from that truck. He turned back to the crowd. It was not Derek Mercer. The silence after that was absolute. Aunt Cynthia looked like she might faint. Troy stared at the ground. Mom had both hands over her mouth. Derek's face had gone white. Captain Harlan took the microphone next. I will not discuss details that should remain private, she said. But I can confirm that Sergeant Evan Mercer received commendation for valor and life-saving action during that deployment. She looked at the brochure on the screen, using his actions to raise money while placing another man's face in front of the story is not honoring service. It is consuming it. That word hit the crowd hard. Consuming. That was what the Mercers had done. They consumed Grandpa's medals, Dad's rank. My silence. They ate from the table and sold the wood beneath it. Derek grabbed a second microphone from the podium. This is ridiculous, he said, voice shaking. Nobody stole anything. The brochure said Mercer son. I am a Mercer son. This is family history. I took the microphone from Ramirez. My hands were shaking. This time I let them. My name is Evan Mercer, I said. The speakers carried my voice over the field. For years, I let people think whatever made them comfortable. I let my brother be the face. I let my mother call my service complicated. I let my family leave my picture off the wall because I thought silence was dignity. I looked at Derek. I was wrong. The wind moved through the flags. I continued. Last night, my family invited me to a hero's dinner with no chair for me. My brother handed me a valet vest and told me to park trucks. Then he poured beer on me in front of people who knew better and waited for me to disappear. The crowd shifted. Some looked away. Good. Then they dragged me outside and asked me to sign away the Mill Creek cabin so they could build Patriot Ridge. When I said no, they called me unstable. I turned toward Mom. Her face crumpled. I have nightmares. I shake sometimes. I don't like fireworks. I sit with my back to walls. That is true, I swallowed. But pain is not proof that I am unworthy. Trauma is not a blank check for people to steal your voice. Someone in the crowd whispered, Amen. I looked back at Derek. You didn't just leave me off the wall. You needed me invisible. Because if people saw me, they would have to ask why you were standing in front of my story. Derek's mouth opened. No words came. Dad nodded once from the side of the stage. Captain Harlan clicked to the next slide. Troy's social media post appeared. The one about jealousy. Then a video. The VFW hall. Derek pouring beer down my shirt. The audience gasped. Derek turned to Troy. Troy looked sick. The video played on silent, which somehow made it worse. The empty bottle. My ruined shirt. Mom grabbing my arm. People laughing. Then the next clip. The security camera outside the side door. Troy shoving me against the wall. Derek throwing my coat into the mud. Aunt Cynthia holding out the folder. Mom stepping out. My mother's voice came through the speakers from the audio Dad's team had pulled from Troy's own recording. Just sign it. The crowd inhaled like one body. Mom sat down hard on a hay bale. Derek snapped, "Turn it off." Dad looked at him. "You wanted a record." The clip continued. Derek's voice sharp and clear. "Your mom spent her life carrying this family. Don't let her start thinking you own the table." Then Aunt Cynthia, "We can tell them you're not well." Then Derek, "We tell them Derek is the real hero. People already believe it." The audio ended. The field stayed silent. No music, no trucks, no patriotic applause, just the sound of flags snapping in the wind. Mrs. Larkin from the church stepped forward first. She had run the donation table for Patriot Ridge. "Marla," she said, voice shaking, "did our fundraiser use Evan's story?" Mom looked up. She tried to speak. Couldn't. Derek answered instead. "This is being twisted." Mrs. Larkin looked at him. "Did it?" Derek's face hardened. "This project helps veterans." Ramirez spoke from the side. "Not if it starts by erasing one." That broke something. People started murmuring. A donor in a navy overcoat turned to Aunt Cynthia. "I want my pledge frozen." Another man said, "Mine too." The county commissioner, who had been standing near the front, with a ribbon-cutting pair of scissors, quietly handed the scissors to his assistant. "We'll need to review the project," he said. Derek spun toward him. "Commissioner, this is a family disagreement." The commissioner looked at the screen. "No, it's a public trust problem." Then he looked toward Troy. "Deputy Mercer." Troy stiffened. The commissioner's voice was calm, but everyone heard it. "Until the department reviews that footage, take off the badge and step away from this event." Troy went red. For a second, I thought he would argue. Then he looked around and realized no one was backing him. Slowly, in front of the town, he unpinned the badge from his shirt and placed it on the registration table. The sound was tiny, but it landed like thunder. Then the truck started moving. At first it was one engine, a low diesel rumble from the refrigerated truck. Everyone turned. The truck that carried the catered food for the launch began backing out of the field. Its reverse alarm beeped through the silence. Beep, beep, beep. Every beep sounded like the Mercer name cracking in public. Then the box truck followed. Tables, chairs, audio equipment, printed banners. Then the rental van. Then the relief organization truck that had been staged for Derek's big photo opportunity. One by one, the support for Patriot Ridge rolled away. Derek stood in the grass, watching his perfect launch leave him in reverse. The sound of those trucks was louder than any speech Dad could have given. Aunt Cynthia hurried after one of the drivers. "Wait, you can't just leave." The driver leaned out the window. "Ma'am, Colonel Mercer guaranteed half this county through floods and ice storms. Derek Mercer guaranteed a check that didn't clear." Then he drove away. The crowd heard every word. Derek looked at Dad. "You ruined me." Dad shook his head. "No, I just stopped carrying you." Derek turned to me. His eyes were full of hatred now. "You think this makes you a man?" I looked at him. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm. "No," I said. "It means I stopped letting you borrow mine." For the first time in my life, Derek had nothing to say. Mom stood slowly. She walked toward me like every step hurt. "Evan," she whispered. I braced myself. For an excuse, for a request, for another quiet command to protect the family. But she stopped a few feet away and looked at my uniform. Really looked. Not at the ribbons, not at the buttons, at me. I knew she said. "That hurt worse than I expected." She covered her mouth, crying. "I knew it was your story." Not all of it, but enough. I told myself Derek needed something. I told myself you didn't want attention. I told myself you were stronger because you were quiet. She shook her head. I was wrong. The whole field seemed to disappear. There was just my mother, the woman who had packed my lunches, the woman who had mailed me socks overseas, the woman who had cried into my hospital blanket when I came home but never knew what to do with the man who came back. "I failed you," she said. I wanted to say it was okay. The old reflex almost rose in me. To comfort her, to make it smaller, to save her from the pain of seeing what she had done. But I had spent too many years bleeding politely. So I said the truth. "Yes," I whispered. "You did," she sobbed. Dad looked away. Derek cursed under his breath and walked off the stage. No one followed him. That was his punishment. Not prison, not handcuffs. Just the discovery that when the borrowed spotlight turned off, nobody knew where to look for him. The Patriot Ridge launch ended before noon. No ribbon was cut. No donor checks were signed. No photo ran in the county paper, except one, a line of veterans saluting a man the town had been told was broken. By evening, Troy deleted the post. Then Melanie deleted hers. Derek posted nothing. Aunt Cynthia sent one text to the family group. "Today was painful. We should avoid public discussion until emotions settle," Dad replied. "Truth is not an emotion." Nobody answered after that. 3 days later, Mrs. Larkin called Mom. The church had questions. So did the VFW. So did every donor who had given money to Patriot Ridge after hearing the story of the Mercer son. Again, there were no lawyers. No dramatic courtroom. No complicated contracts. Just folding chairs in the church basement and a long table covered with coffee paper cups and shame. Aunt Cynthia stood at the front with the donation ledger. Derek did not come. Mom did. So did I. Dad stood in the back, arms crossed. Mrs. Larkin opened the meeting with a prayer that was shorter than usual and much sharper. Then Aunt Cynthia read the ledger aloud. Every name, every amount, every note, for the retreat, for wounded veterans, for the Mercer son who saved lives, for healing, for honor. Her voice cracked halfway through. No one comforted her. When she finished, Mrs. Larkin looked at Mom. "What happens now?" Mom stood. Her hands trembled, but she did not hide them. "The money should go where people thought it was going," she said. "Not to a resort, not to a brand. To actual meals rides, repairs, and help for veterans and first responders in this county." Then she looked at me. "If Evan agrees." Every eye turned to me. A month earlier, that would have made me want to disappear. Now I stood. "Grandpa's cabin has a kitchen," I said. "The roof leaks. The porch is unsafe. The stove barely works. But it has a table." Mrs. Larkin smiled through tears. "What are you saying?" I looked at Dad. He nodded. I looked at Mom. She looked like she was holding her breath. "I'm saying we fix the cabin," I said. "We stop selling healing and start serving food." That was how Mercer Table began. Not Patriot Ridge, Not a retreat, not a glossy project with a logo, a table. The first Saturday, 6 people came. 2 Vietnam veterans, a young firefighter with tired eyes, a single mother whose husband was deployed, an old deputy who had hated Troy for years and pretended not to, and Ramirez, who drove 3 hours with his wife and 2 kids because he said he wanted to eat in the house that raised the medic who raised him from the dead. We served chili cornbread coffee and pie. Mom cooked like she was trying to apologize through every bowl. Dad fixed the porch rail. I checked blood pressure in the side room and drove one old man to the pharmacy when he admitted he had not picked up his heart pills. Nobody made speeches. Nobody cut ribbons. Nobody used the word legacy until Pike saw the old photo wall we had started in the hallway. It was not polished. It was not branded. Grandpa beside his truck. Dad holding me as a baby. Mom laughing in the feed store. Me in uniform. Me in EMT blues. Ramirez with his kids. Buck wearing that stupid camouflage bandana. Under the photos, Dad hung a note in Grandpa's handwriting. He had found it tucked inside an old field manual. A wall remembers faces. A table proves who matters. I stood there reading it for a long time. Mom came up beside me. Her eyes were red. I should have put you on the wall, she said. I looked at the photos. No, I said. You should have made sure I had a seat. She closed her eyes. I know. That was the beginning. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But truth. And truth, I learned, is the only clean place to start. Life did not become perfect after that. That is not how life works. I still had nightmares. I still jumped at fireworks. I still worked ambulance shifts that left me sitting in my truck afterward, gripping the steering wheel until my hands stopped shaking. But something had changed. I no longer thought shaking meant weakness. A body can shake and still stand. A voice can tremble and still tell the truth. A man can be wounded and still be whole. A year after the Patriot Ridge launch that never happened, we held a dinner at Mercer table. Not a gala, not a fundraiser, just a dinner. Long folding tables stretched under the trees. Kids ran between them with rolls in their hands. Old veterans argued about baseball. Firefighters compared bad coffee. Nurses from the county hospital sat beside farmers. Dad grilled chicken in the yard wearing an apron that said, "Logistics wins wars." Mom carried trays from the kitchen. When she reached my table, she paused. There was an empty chair beside me. She looked at it, then at me. Is this seat taken? A simple question. A year earlier, it would have broken me. This time I pulled it out. For you, I said. She sat down carefully like the chair was something sacred. Maybe it was. Halfway through dinner, a truck pulled into the drive. Conversation softened. Derek stepped out. He wore jeans and a gray jacket. No polished boots. No flag pin. No perfect smile. He looked thinner, tired, human in a way I had never seen before. Dad saw him and stood. I put a hand on Dad's arm. "I've got it." Dad looked at me, then nodded. Derek walked toward me slowly. The old fear did not come. Neither did the old anger. What came was stranger. Distance, like I was looking at a house I used to live in and realizing I no longer had a key. "Evan," he said. I waited. He looked around at the tables, at Ramirez laughing with his kids, at Mom sitting quietly beside my empty coffee cup, at the photo wall visible through the cabin window. I heard this place is doing good. It is. That's good. He shoved his hands into his pockets. I was angry back then. I almost smiled. Back then. As if cruelty were a weather event. "You were cruel," I said. He flinched. "I know." "No," I said quietly. "You don't. Not yet." He looked at me, so I told him. "You used my silence because it made your story bigger. You poured beer on me because you knew people would laugh. You called me unstable because you knew it was the one word that could make people stop listening to me. And you tried to take Grandpa's cabin because you thought being loud made you the heir." His eyes reddened. "I'm sorry." The words hung between us. For years I thought an apology would fix something in me. But standing there under the trees, with my father at the grill, my mother at my table and men I had once carried through fire-eating cornbread in my grandfather's yard, I realized something. An apology is not a medal. You do not pin it on the wound and call the wound healed. It is only the first honest breath after a long lie. Thank you for saying it, I said. His shoulders dropped. Then I added, but you don't get a seat at my table today. He looked up. Hurt crossed his face. The old me would have rushed to soften it. The new me let him feel it. Maybe someday, I said. Not today. Derek nodded slowly. For once he did not argue. He turned and walked back to his truck. Mom watched him leave with tears in her eyes. But she did not ask me to call him back. That mattered. Dad came over after Derek drove away. You okay? I looked at the road, then at the tables, then at the cabin, then at the photo wall where my picture finally hung beside Grandpa's, not above anyone, not below anyone, just there, where it belonged. Yes, I said. I really am. Dad smiled. That's my boy. I shook my head. Number. His eyebrow lifted. I'm my own man. For a second, Dad looked like he might cry. Then he smiled wider. Even better. That night after everyone left, Dad, Mom, and I sat on the porch with paper cups of coffee. The same porch Derek had wanted to tear down. The same cabin Mom had almost signed away. The same table Grandpa had left behind without knowing how badly we would need it. The air smelled like wood smoke and wet grass. Somewhere in the dark, a dog barked. Mom looked at the photo wall through the window. I spent so many years trying to protect the Mercer name, she said. Dad sipped his coffee, and she looked at me. I forgot names belonged to people. None of us spoke for a while. Then Dad reached into his jacket and pulled out a small object wrapped in an old handkerchief. He handed it to me. Inside was Grandpa's pocket knife. Bone handle, silver bolsters, the blade worn thin from years of use. I had not seen it since the funeral. He wanted you to have it, Dad said. My throat tightened. Why didn't you give it to me before? Dad looked toward the field. Because I thought you needed to be ready. I turned the knife over in my hand. Tiny initials were scratched near the hinge. Who am? Walter Mercer. What does ready mean? I asked. Dad leaned back in his chair. Knowing a legacy is not something you inherit. It's something you refuse to let people cheapen. I held the knife carefully. For years I thought dignity meant being silent, taking the insult, absorbing the blow, letting other people have the room because I could survive outside it. But that was not dignity. That was disappearance dressed up as discipline. Dignity was standing in your stained shirt and saying no. Dignity was wearing the uniform even when your hands shook. Dignity was letting your mother's apology hurt without rushing to rescue her from it. Dignity was telling your brother he might be forgiven someday, but not today. And legacy. Legacy was not the uniform on the wall, not the medals, not the flag under glass, not the staged dinner, or the glossy brochure, or the speech about service from someone who had never carried the cost of it. Legacy was the table still standing after the lies left. Legacy was who got fed, who got named, who got a chair. So if you have ever been erased from your own family's story, if you have ever watched someone louder take credit for your scars, if you have ever been called broken by people who only loved the version of you that stayed useful and quiet, remember this: a wound does not make you weak, silence does not make them right, and family does not get to use your pain as decoration while denying you a seat at the table. Sometimes the people who call you damaged are only afraid of what will happen when you finally stand up straight. Now I want to ask you something. If your family humiliated you in public, used your story for their own gain, and then came back later asking for forgiveness, would you forgive the mother first? Would you forgive Derek? Would you keep the table open for strangers, but closed to the brother who stole your story? Or would you protect your peace and say, not today? Tell me what you would do.